To what?
He says it's good.
Hi, my name is Doris Hall-Gulati, and I'm coming to you from the Philadelphia Virtual Music Festival, and this is part of the Relief Fund, as you saw in the advertisement earlier, Music Relief Fund. I'm going to be presenting to you today just a little bit about the clarinet family. As you can see, maybe in red here, I'm surrounded by some of my friends right now. And I should say my Grenadilla Wood friends, and I'll come back to talking and explaining a little more about Grenadilla Wood in a bit. The first piece that I was playing was the last minute and a half from Carl Maria von Weber's Clarinet Concerto No. 2. I thought it was a great way to start because Carl Maria von Weber is considered the king of the clarinet repertoire. He wrote this piece in 1811. Now, I'll go back and talk a little about the clarinet, but this is about at least 100 years after the initial inception of starting the invention of the clarinet. But by the time we got to the late classical periods into Romantic, Weber loved the clarinet, and he did so much for our repertoire, and this was one of them, one of those pieces. And I wanted to sort of start off with something rousing in the king of the clarinet repertoire. I should say that the clarinet really was invented by Denner around the year 1700. There's a little bit maybe 1698, but really was around 1700. He started this invention because at the time, the instruments of choice that were similar to a clarinet was something called the chalumeau. The chalumeau is, and still is, I shouldn't say was, because we still have some chalumeau around, was more like a recorder instrument, like a recorder that you get in school, maybe made out of plastic. No reed at the time, there was no reed on a recorder. And it has some holes, no keys, such as a clarinet would have. Now, the chalumeau is a very gorgeous instrument. It was used by shepherds, and it's a song-like instrument for solo work. However, at the time, Vivaldi and Bach, and there were some fantastic things happening in Western music, a chalumeau, being this tiny little recorder type of instrument, would not have been loud enough to hold itself in the orchestra. So there was some chalumeau music. Even Telemann wrote a concerto for two chalumeau and orchestra. But again, with an oboes, and at the time the oboes had a very bright and very penetrating sound, and bassoons and horns and trumpets and flutes, flutes being one of the original instruments ever on earth, flute and percussion, the chalumeau, being this tiny little recorder thing, could not hold through. So Denner was experimenting with improving the chalumeau. And at the same time, because the chalumeau also had a reed and a mouthpiece, as such, like this. This doesn't have a reed on it, but a mouthpiece. But he still couldn't get it to really come through. So he decided to start making something with some keys. He added a couple keys. He added a register key, gave us an overblown, a 12th above, so more than an octave, to get us in to a higher range. Now, at that time, there was also the instruments called clarini. Now, this would have been in the mid to late 1600s. Clarini were sort of like a high trumpet-sounding, piercing instrument. So the chalumeau, which is our low register now, as we call on the modern clarinet, had this beautiful song-like low register, and the clarini had this like very trumpet-piercing high register. Adding this register key and some keys was a way, and a bell was a way for Denner to try to figure out, can I get an instrument that's going to combine these two and cut through? And as a matter of fact, he did. And the first place that we see the clarinet being used in the orchestra is actually with Vivaldi, believe it or not. And Vivaldi, this would have been pretty early on in 1716, so the clarinet really wasn't around that long. So there was a couple keys, things had changed, moved on. We're progressing, and we're also doing what many instruments did at the time, which was to have several instruments in several keys. So chalumeau had several, like recorders do. Clarinets, we're going to have several, because we're going to get to this A clarinet. We have this tiny little E flat we'll get to. We have a basset clarinet, which we're really going to get to next with the A. We get into an alto type instrument, the basset horn, and here I hope you can see this, which I think you can. You're going to get to the big bad boy here, one of my favorites, the bass clarinet. All in due time, I promise. So we're getting into these years after 1716. Johann Carl Stamitz comes in and starts writing concertos for the clarinet. He loves the clarinet. He is actually of Czech heritage, even though he's German. His father was Bohemian. And he starts writing, and he writes actually 11. He wrote 10 concertos himself for clarinet and orchestra. One he combined with Joseph Baer. But he wrote us some concertos. And not long after that, as probably most of us know, Mozart then wrote one of his most famous concertos ever in the year of his death, 1791. So we're going along. And he wrote this concerto, which is where I'm going next, originally for the basset horn. Now the basset horn's in between these two times. 1750, Stamitz writes the first concerto. Then 1770, the basset horn and the bass clarinet are invented. We wanted something with deeper sounds. We needed lecks. It's not really a horn, but neither is the English horn in the oboe family, but they call us a horn. Basset or alto, there is no, it's invented in 1770. We do not know who invented it. So Mozart starts to talk to his good friend Anton Stadler. These guys used to kind of hang together, have fun, play. And he talks to him, he says, look, I want to write a concerto. Again, this is near the end of that century, and this is near his death. Anton Stadler says, let's write it for the basset horn in G. The basset horn is actually in F, but there's many different sizes and many different keys, like on a piano, of these instruments. So they start. The original manuscript is in basset horn. Mozart's not getting the full range. He wants lower notes than an A clarinet, which is longer than the standard B flat, but he can't get it. He can't get high enough in the basset horn. He gets real low. There's just something missing. Anton says, I'm going to go to my inventor. I'm going to take my A clarinet, and goes down to a written E in the treble clef. He goes, and I'm going to add a few notes, which I will demonstrate when I get this on here. I'm going to add a few notes so that you can do what you want. And voila, Mozart's famous clarinet concerto has come to life. What I'm going to do today is to give you a sample of this, because it's one of the most beautiful things. I'm going to start in the beginning of the third movement, or the last movement, and I'm going to start playing on the A clarinet, because most people do not own a basset clarinet. This is not common. most people have adapted and play the concerto on the standard soprano A clarinet. But then halfway through this 2-minute demonstration, I'm going to switch to the basso clarinet, hopefully in enough time and successful, so that you can hear some of what originally was written with these low notes that Mozart wanted. So you get a flavor of these extra notes. Before I play it, I'm going to play some low notes for you on the A clarinet switch so you can hear some of the low ones. And again, we call this the Shawimo register. Now, we have those same notes, but more. And this is what Mozart was looking for. So we're going to use the same mouthpiece, although notice it's a little wobbly. Let's hope this works out. Okay, so I'm going to start, like I said, I'm going to play 2 minutes and hopefully very successfully switch over to the basso clarinet so you can hear that instrument as well in a cool sound. I should add that, well, you're thinking to yourself, why do we have so many clarinets in different keys? And why were there so many Shawimo? Why are maybe there's so many trumpets? At one point in the history of the clarinet, there was a maker in the 1800s who wanted to combine and said, why should you have to keep switching back and forth and blah, blah, blah. And it was the consensus by all that we want to switch back and forth because each instrument has a little bit of a unique sound. It is a little different in length. Now, minus the mouthpiece, you can see the A clarinet's like almost an inch longer. The E flat clarinet's much shorter, and the basso clarinet was even much longer. These are much longer. The bore is different. It's wider. It has a little bit different sound, and many times the composers were hearing in their head a different sound, and they wanted those particular sounds. Or, because I think for the most part we think, well, if it's written in A clarinet, it's much easier to read in that key, so that's why they put it in that. That's not always the case. There was a big fight, so to speak. They really did want to have a variety of clarinet to choose from. So again, this is going to be hopefully a successful trade in the middle, the beginning of the rondo of Mozart's clarinet concerto. I should say basso clarinet concerto. pretty happy about that considering my mouthpiece wanted to fall out. Reason being, every bore as well is slightly different on our barrels, being the barrel, so it looks like a barrel, on the clarinet. So, good, and I hope you got the good flavor of the A clarinet and the basso clarinet. I have a real, I'm very, very lucky, blessed, what I always say, to be able to own one. And I just love it. I have a hard time playing that concerto with the adjusted octaves and bringing us up because the A standard soprano clarinet doesn't have the notes. So I kind of like it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, we are moving onward, but not upward. We're going back, as in volume-wise or pitch-wise. We're going backwards to more of an alto instrument. We're going back to what I mentioned earlier, the basset horn. Now, excuse me for a second, I want to make sure I stand in place so you can see this, so I have to use a case because I'm not quite tall enough with the peg. Actually, the basset horn is known to have been Mozart's favorite instrument. So much so that, yes, he did try to write his concerto, but that didn't work. But in the Mozart Requiem, the last piece unfinished by him, he didn't have the typical standard woodwind section of flute, oboe, bassoon, clarinets. His section is just 2 basset horns and 2 bassoons. And then we fill out with the rest of the brass. Haunting, haunting sound, super, super cool. This is in the key of F, and it's alto, so it means it's lower, whether it's near the E flat clarinet here. You'll know this is E flat. E flats and Fs are close in pitch, but this is a sopranino instrument. This is an alto instrument. So let me give you an idea. This has a tremendous range, and hopefully I'll be able to play the entire 4-octave range. I agree with Mozart. Super cool. It kind of gets a bad rap. It's like E flat alto clarinet, alto trombone, viola jokes. Doesn't get a good rap nowadays, but does have a tremendous range, and it's a super interesting instrument. I would say we do have more Beethoven picked up in the creatures from Prometheus in his ballet. There's an entire movement 14, that has an incredible, it starts with a solo basset horn solo, some point treats back and forth with the oboe. Beautiful. There are, in modern times, Carl Stockhausen has written some really, really cool, interpretive, interesting, very modern zero music, but with dance as well. The basset horn player gets to dance. So it hasn't completely fallen out of favor, but again, I'm very lucky that I actually own one. This is not something that's more standard. Its counterpart in modern times is the E flat alto clarinet, and that we have a lot of in bands, but even those have fallen out of favor. Like I was saying, kind of all gets a bad rap. What I do want to do is I want to play, as I've been trying to play original works for all these instruments. Stamets, back to that dude that wrote us 11 B-flat clarinet concertos, he did write a concerto for basset horn. And it gives me a chance to play a lot of the range again. So I decided I'd like to do like the last minute with a little bit of a cadenza of the end of this concerto for you, and this is of the first movement, not the last movement, not the third movement. Play. And I will say, I've had fantastic COVID-19 friends with some music -1, but I've also had to do them myself. So this one is me on the piano, so please don't shoot the pianist, just do it with me. I try to do as well as I can for this and the next piece, but it's not quite the same as having the orchestra playing. Piano reductions are very difficult, and it's just not quite the same. So again, I'm going to play so you can hear some of this very large register. Like with the concerto for basset clarinet, I went from the very low to very, very high. So I hope that you will actually take a slight bit of fondness for the basset horn and the basset clarinet. I really like them, and this gave you just a little idea of the tremendous range, and it does, though, have an incredibly hollow, haunting sound. And so thinking about Mozart, I can understand, especially near the end of his life, why he would be partial to that sound. Now, we are going onwards and upwards. I'm finally grabbing this little beast. Okay, the E-flat soprano clarinet, sometimes referred to as the sopranino clarinet. Now, this clarinet, I'm going to make sure I get my dates right on this one. I'm not always that sure. Well, there's a good chance. There isn't actually dates that are absolutely set, fixed on the D clarinet or the E-flat clarinet, but they're all about in the same time as we were getting all these clarinets in the mid to late 1700s. Now, at that time, John Molter, in fact, real early, wrote 4 concerti for the D clarinet. Now, the D clarinet would be slightly longer. But the D clarinet has more or less fallen out of favor. There are some people that have some, but the E-flat clarinet has taken it over. Now, the E-flat clarinet, to give you an idea of this, just to give you an idea of the pitch range and what we're jumping from to this. I think I hear dogs. It was like very interesting. This is more like the piccolo of the flute family, the piccolo of the clarinet family, or the piccolo trumpet. So what I wanted to do was, instead of like, let's say for any, in case anybody's familiar with this, Berlioz wrote a work called Symphonie Fantastique. And when we get to the Witch's Sabbath, the opening theme, something like that, or Richard Strauss's Till Eulenspiegel's Mary Pranch. So we have all these like in your face or like representing something crazy. What I wanted to do was play an original work by an amazing composer and clarinetist where it's something very melodious, maybe exciting and maybe huge range, but not where it's like the brass players all want to smack me upside the head because I have to play E-flat in the orchestra for that piece. So what I picked was something by Ernesto Cavallini. Cavallini was a fantastic clarinetist. He was known actually as the Paganini of the clarinet. He was also the principal clarinet in the famous La Scala Upper Orchestra. He wrote, like Paganini, funny how he was named that, he wrote theme and variations on the Carnival of Venice. This theme is a Neapolitan folk theme. I think we all know about it. And I wanted to do just some of the theme and a few of the variations in the end, just so you can get an idea that there's more to be said other than in your face or like a statement or a one-measure statement. I'm going to try very hard, this is extremely difficult, to give you a flavor of the E-flat clarinet when it's in the melodic situation. Carnival of Venice, some of the themes and some of the variations by Ernesto Cavallini. of the stomachs and the basset horn, that both instruments created around the same time, but the prominence of this much later, almost even 50 to 70 years later. So, we are now going on to one of my faves, the bass clarinet. Now, I don't know, I hope then, I'm going to ask my husband, can they see this?
Yes.
Okay, if I put it, can they see it now, or no, should I hold it up?
Just
Okay.
a little
Not
bit of the
exactly.
bell.
Okay, so the bass clarinet, invented around 1770, about the same time as the basset horn. I like the bass. Maybe it's like the big dog, little dog thing, because I'm little and this instrument's big. You know how they like each other, but I'm not sure why, but I love it. I love the timbre. I love what it can do. I know that actually it was early. It was Meyerbeer's opera, The Huguenots. And this would have been, you know what, I want to know what year that is actually. He wrote that in, I'm not sure what it was. I'm wrong. Anyway, Meyerbeer wrote an opera in his 5th act. He has a gigantic bass clarinet solo. We know even other things like Aida, where we have bass clarinet solos. We have things. It's not just like what I think about, or what most people think about. We have that too. That's ominous and that's cool. We also have great. We have those things. And we have from band. But we also have, remember this name if you ever want to listen to something super cool, Eric Dolphy in jazz in the 60s. Unbelievable what he did for the bass clarinet. So I happen to like it. I'm going to show you, there are lots of keys on this thing, plus back keys that are similar to bassoons. I'm going to show you, and hopefully, again, we can get that huge 4-octave range, like the basset horn, the basset clarinet. I'm going to try and see what happens. Super cool. You see how big, and all the notes in between all of that. What I wanted to do was to play a few things. The first piece is actually going to be by myself, because this is one of the COVID-19 situations when I couldn't get the tremendous pianist that this was written for. These 3 fantasy pieces by a living composer named Dr. John Carbon. He wrote these pieces for Steve Groff and I, and we premiered them, recorded them, and they were published, which is great. The recording made it so it could be published. I wanted to start with something that's dark and mysterious, like you might hear the bass clarinet coming in and out, like you did in Jaws, but also on some Star Trek episodes. I know the movie back in the 90s, Interview with a Vampire, there's a tremendous amount of bass clarinet, contrabass clarinet. When something's ominous, listen really carefully, because those basses are always going to come around. So I want to play a little of this, gets us into the range, and then I want to do play and another original work with piano. One second, I'm playing this by myself first. That's okay? Good. And I should add, my husband's been tremendous through this, helping me. But the first piece I'm going to play by myself. Something. I'm going with this, but just to give you down into that extended range. So, I do want to play, and again, it's another original work by Eugene Bolza, who is actually a French composer. He wrote us a piece in 1939 for bass, clarinet, and piano. He wrote some other works for, he wrote a lot of fantastic stuff for wind players, but this one he wrote is more like a competition piece. And instead of playing the whole ballade, I just want to play the Allegro Vivo, fast and fiery section at the end, just to give you an idea of bass clarinet really, again, moving around more than we would think so. Just a little flavor of something. But I hope this is, at least hearing some of these instruments, I hope this has sort of turned you on, in particular to some of these more auxiliary or oddball instruments: bass clarinet, basset horn, E-flat clarinet. I do want to go back, just to, I just want to say, go back to the B-flat, the standard clarinet, with which I began by playing that Weber. Remember the end of that? I want to play something by probably one of the most well-known, if not the well-known, but one of the most well-known American composers of the 20th century, Leonard Bernstein. Unbelievable. I mean, we should think of West. There's so many things to think about. His incredible talent all around and everything. Some of this actually, I'm going to play the last about minute of his last movement of his sonata for clarinet and piano. He wrote in 1941 for a friend, those two together at Juilliard for a colleague, and is the first work published by Bernstein. And I do sort of start to feel a little that West Side Story. It's got some interesting rhythms, and I thought I wanted to end with something fiery, and just also by an American composer, just to give us something. And get back to the B-flat, get back to our standard clarinet. Before I do that, I do want to say, I hope you can see this. Up, closer, closer. Please remember, we are bringing this to you as part of the relief fund. So many people, everyone's affected by COVID-19 in so many ways, not just fiscally, mentally. Artists are truly, truly suffering. So many, whether they have a big full-time job or they don't, they're suffering. And bringing a program like this to you was just to be part of that. I wanted to give back, do whatever I can to help my colleagues and to help us, and to keep you all interested and knowing that we want to bring more people in our community. We miss playing with people. It's hard. It's interesting sort of being like this, but it's not the same. It's not the same as having the energy from the audience and having the energy from your colleagues. So please remember that we want to be back, and we will take $1 helps. Anything helps. So again, I'm going to end a little bit with the end of this Bernstein sonata for clarinet and piano. Sharing your time with me today. I hope we all had a good time. Remember the Relief Fund, and be well and have a safe and happy rest of 2020. Thank you.